hey, anytime you got documentable proof something works as a promoter, you owe it to your brand and you owe it to yourself to try it again. Try something along those lines again. You've got some good market research. People have paid for it out of their own pocket. So the ECW brand, had this cult following, and everybody thought it's like buying the last Bible. This is very religious ground to a lot of hardcore wrestling fans that breathed and embraced ECW. Heyman and his crew, his team, did a great job of exploiting the us against the world philosophy to encourage an atmosphere where the audience would tightly embrace the brand. And they did that. They just didn't have enough people embracing at the end of the day. But they did a great job of the ones that stayed with them, loved them, and they still do. So, but I once we saw that there was still a bloom on the rose, albeit a small rose, or maybe it's kind of among all the bushes and the thistle. There's a rose here somewhere, and if we can pick the rose, that means money for the company. So that's kind of the idea. I think we're all kind of pleasantly surprised at that loyal audience of ECW. We knew the audience was loyal. That was not a surprise. The volume of loyalty, how many people were loyal, was what surprised us.
Well, what surprised a lot of people reading The Torch was that Paul Heyman has been removed from the SmackDown creative team. He would write, with all the recent talk about Heyman's creative triumph with ECW and the influence he has on the industry as a result, one thing often overlooked is what a mess his career was before ECW. Heyman could not last in any corporate group situation predating running the show in ECW. He had numerous fallouts with management in WCW. Before that, he didn't get along with Vern Gagne in the AWA. And since the demise of ECW, whenever Heyman has been put in a position of influence within WWE, he has drawn criticism within WWE, even from his supporters, as someone who is just too stubborn to do what is necessary to last within a set structure. Last week's decision to move him off of the SmackDown creative team was said to be the result of Heyman, quote, playing mind games and, quote, getting caught in a lie. Others say Heyman creates jealousy among others and power because he speaks up about what doesn't make sense, exposes the lack of wrestling knowledge of others in power, and ends up creating a situation where, in order to save face, his incompetent political opponents end up drawing attention to Heyman's faults in an effort to remove him for their own domain. So I don't know if there's ever been a more, just based on what Bruce has said, this is on the money, as far as an assessment of Heyman knows more than most of these other folks about wrestling, but just can't help himself and sort of out politics himself. And Bruce has used the phrase die on a hill, that he would find several issues that he would say, this is a hill I want to die on, or is this really a hill worth dying on? What do you remember about Heyman being removed here? And what can you say about Wade's classification here of Heyman's demeanor?
Pretty accurate regarding Paul's demeanor at that time in his life. I remember, I bet you the first time he heard Down the Hill was a conversation he and I had where he came to my office after a creative meeting. He pitched some ideas to Vince, and one in particular involving Guido. And we hired Guido. He wrestled for us. He was a referee for us. Great guy. And so he came in all pissed off because one of his big ideas Vince didn't like it, and this blew it out of the water. I said, what was it? He said, well, I had little Guido. And I said, well, hold. You pitched an idea, a top idea, to the old man involving Guido. Yeah. I said, you're dying on the wrong hill. You should know Vince is never going to allow that to happen. If it happens organically, and he sees that little Guido is starting to get over, then he'll run, and it'll be his idea. But until then, you ain't got a chance. I said, you're dying on the wrong hill, Paul. Paul's issues Paul has not played well with others over the years. I remember when I put him on as my broadcast partner in WCW, I almost got a standing ovation from the booking committee because now they didn't have to deal with him. Because the same thing was there. He was smarter than most of the people in the creative process, but that was not the structure and that was not his role. He would oftentimes ignore structure, whatever it may be, or the lack thereof, and his role just to assert himself. And look, he's a genius in so many areas. You know, I'm a big Paul Heyman fan, big time. When Lawler left and Paul became my partner seamlessly, all the demands of what we had to sell and push and mention on Monday Night Raw, a 2-hour show that was packed. We didn't miss a beat. And so he's amazing. He's a Hall of Fame guy. But sometimes, to be honest with you, his immaturity didn't do him any favors. Sometimes his, the word I'm looking for, he's, I'm trying to think, Conrad, that he can be indignant. He can get frustrated with people's stupidity because he is so much smarter than a lot of people in a lot of ways.
Right.
But his skill set of his communication skill set in that era wasn't anything to be coveted. He's gotten better over the years. Obviously, he's older. He's got teenage children, and he's maturing. And look, there's nothing wrong with maturing at a later age than is expected in our society. I'm 67. I know sure as hell there's some areas of my life that I have not matured yet. But I'm enjoying life, so what am I going to do? That's Paul. His life's getting better, and it's getting more balance, more stability. But he's always going to have some of those issues. I'll promise you that. He'll always have an issue where he sees something so clearly, so big picture-wise, so detail-oriented, that sometimes the common guy doesn't have that vision or the ability to have that vision. So that's why he's very special. Great creative vision, and it's just a special gift that those great bookers have, where they can really visualize a scene in their head or an angle that they want to shoot. And Paul's one of those guys.
Let's talk about sort of the backstory to this thing. I don't know why this is amusing to me, but it is. Wade Keller would report a few weeks after this. It's become clear that Stephanie McMahon was primarily responsible for Paul Heyman being pulled for the SmackDown writing team with encouragement from Brian Gerwitz, who is considered a model subordinate to the McMahons.
Brian Gerwitz.
Yeah, my apology. It's a rib that I always pronounce his name wrong, and I've carried it over to the wrong show.
Damn you, Conrad.
Chat me up here. Are you surprised, or do you remember that this was a Stephanie decision?
I'm not surprised, but I could probably pass a quiz on it before we started talking about it. I know that she and Heyman had a lot of philosophical differences, and I'm sure that Paul got close to the edge on how far to take the argument before he backed away, because he just was hell bent on getting his way. He was very defiant. Not that she wasn't, but she had the right last name. He didn't. And that's how it is. Well, I never heard such, folks, you have heard of such a thing. It's happened a zillion times in the world. They own the goddamn company. Figure it out. It's not public trust. So anyway, they didn't get along, and to any major degree. But I never really fully. She never came to me and said, and nor did she have to, or she maybe need to. But she and I never had a discussion about Paul being a pain in the ass. Even though I knew she felt that way, we never talked about it, other than maybe the occasional eye roll, or her head shake, or something like that. But to have an open discussion about Paul and his good points and his bad points, we never had. So therefore, I never thought it had escalated to that level that we're talking about here now. But maybe it did. I don't know. But Vince liked Paul's creativity and the fact that Paul kept Vince alert and on his toes, because you never knew what Heyman was going to say, or when he was going to say it, or what great idea he was going to have next.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.